You're with Julian on the Brownlow in list season. So last week I did my top 20 albums of the year in a terrific year for albums, and this week is my films of the year, best and worst. And I've said many times the worst films of the year list is my favourite of all of them because I'm a miserable piece of work. Now I'm going to tell you straight off, the number one best film of the year in my list is One Battle After Another, the Paul Thomas Anderson film. The reason I'm saying that up front is it is just too crushingly dull to end on that note. It is the most blatantly obvious choice that there could possibly be, but the main reason is this is by far the worst year of movies that I've included in my top 10. Normally, I would say I've given an 8.5 out of 10 to the film that comes in at 15, and this year I've got films that get 7 that are nearly in the top 5. There are great films, Eddington, and I don't know the other ones, but there's a Park Chan one. There's quite a few films this year that, as usual, don't get a wide release, so you don't get to see them by the end of the year. But normally that doesn't matter. It's just that everything was so unbelievably mid this year. All of the follow-ups to previously loved films were incredibly mid or terrible. Very, very little happened on the superhero front. I don't think I gave above a 7 to anything on the superhero front. It was relentlessly bad. So it's not like One Battle After Another nicked it at the end. It was the only film I would have given 9 out of 10 to this year. So that's why I'm saying up front, there's not a lot in this list to warrant, you know, the difference between the worst and best films is actually not that big this year. So musically I'm going to play stuff from the best tracks from this century so far. So I'll come back with the first kickoff. I'll do it in chunks, which will become apparent. So after The Walkman and The Rat, I will get into my top 10 best films of the year, and that is really not much to write home about. So let's start off with the 10th best film of the year, and these are all going to be very mealy-mouthed praises. So I think Ryan Coogler is one of the most overrated directors in the modern era. I have put online a review of his first film from 2013, Fruitvale Station, which I gave a 9 out of 10 to, and is the only film that I've even given above an 8 out of 10 to. I thought that Creed was very amiable, but it wasn't a great film, but it was well done. Black Panther, one of the most overrated MCU film, and Black Panther 2 was absolutely terrible. And he came back with Sinners, one of the big cultural touchstones of the year. A lot of people said that it was a remake of From Dusk Till Dawn. For me, that was hugely ironic because I absolutely love the George Clooney, Quentin Tarantino part of From Dusk Till Dawn up until the vampires arrive, and then I thought it got really crap. And I felt the same about Sinners. Like, the setup for the whole juke joint sort of scenario in the bayou in the south was brilliant, and I was not the only person to say I would have much rather the vampires didn't appear, because once they did at the halfway stage, it all just got generic and rote, and you pretty much knew everything that was coming. On the plus side, it was a good film. It just wasn't a great film. The cinematography was outstanding. The sound was amazing. The music was amazing. And some of the music sequences were incredible. His mastery of the technical side of filmmaking isn't in doubt. I just don't think that he's put together a compelling narrative of a film since Fruitvale Station. But it was still a good film. So at number 10 in my films of the year is Sinners. Exactly the same for number 9. So number 9 is Weapons, which is the second film from Zach Cregger. And I thought his first film, was it Barbarian, was hugely overrated. And I think this is quite a lot overrated. But I thought that a lot of the problems that I had with Barbarian, he actually improved on in this film. It was very interesting. It just didn't develop anything. So it had this amazing setup for the opening where all these kids go missing in the town. But in between there and the arrival of the astonishing and award-winning Amy Madigan, who is the only outstanding person in the film, but she is outstanding. In between, I just thought it spun its wheels. I didn't think that Josh Brolin's character was just like here he is. It's Josh Brolin. I thought the teacher as well. She started off pretty decent and then just didn't develop in any direction. And there was a disconnect between what was going on. Like, it tried to sort of wed itself into, you know, a borderline believable scenario, but it really wasn't. I think like 28 kids under the age of 7 going, or under the age of 10 going missing, isn't wall-to-wall press coverage in your town for the next year. But everyone just sort of carried on. But it had lots and lots of great moments. Very well made again. And I did think he stood up a lot more as a director. That's, if I didn't mention him, Zach Kreger. All right, so I'm doing my top 10 countdown of my best films of the year. And to give you an indication of how weak this list is, given that in real time, as in the course of the year, I had some time out towards the end of the year. I didn't review Begonia and One Battle After Another, which are in this list. I didn't give a film above 8 out of 10 all year, which has never happened. And the only things I gave 9 out of 10 to were TV shows. So I'm just doing an aside. There were 2 TV shows this year that I actually reviewed. I don't normally review TV shows. Adolescence was obviously a watershed moment, an incredible artistic achievement, an amazingly timely focus on the manosphere, and the effect it has on sculpting young male minds, and also the absolute disconnect between adults and what's happening in the barbaric classrooms. It was quite a confronting watch, an emotionally shattering experience. I've put my review online, and I've also put a piece online, What to Do with a Problem, about Jamie, the lead boy, who is now a multiple award winner for his performance. So that was very, very timely and on point and electric, and also like completely original filmmaking. The one-shot takes, not one shot, but one take. So it didn't matter how many cameras you had, but basically that once they started acting for the whole hour, the cameras would follow them around without a break. It was an incredible achievement. And the other one that was incredibly timely was Louis Theroux, The Settlers. The appalling behaviour of the settlers moving into the West Bank was excoriated by Louis Theroux in his normal style. I think the last 10 years of Louis Theroux have been really pitifully retreading his glory days without any of the intrigue. So for him to come back with such an explosive and incredible drama documentary on the BBC, who are amazingly gun-shy when it comes to criticising Israel, it was incredible stuff. And obviously one of the villains of the year was that lady that shoved Louis Theroux. You could see how important it was to them for the Palestinians to be removed, non-negotiable to remove the Palestinians from the West Bank and Gaza Strip. So they were 2 incredibly powerful and timely TV shows that I gave 9+ to, and I didn't on any movies. I'll come back with the next tranche of my best of the year after this. You're with Julian, continuing my countdown of the best films in the worst year for movies that I have reviewed on this show. And number 8, Thunderbolts, another mid-tier film in my top 10 of the year. I've mentioned that there are awards contenders that I just haven't seen yet, but even so, normally mainstream films, there are at least some that are great. I did really like Thunderbolts. I thought the visuals for once for a superhero film, unlike Superman, were actually really, really good. I thought the thematic quality of the piece was really good. I thought the Florence Pugh was absolutely standout, absolutely fantastic. The downside of the film, it had 2 massive flaws for me. One was the script. The dialogue just wasn't as intelligent or sophisticated enough to carry much of the thematic themes, which are quite dark. These are all very broken people. Florence was amazing, and so was the Sentinel, a great character as well. But the dialogue was often too pat to really carry the weight of the story, and also the repetition of a lot of the scenes and the length of a lot of the scenes kind of put the kibosh. When they were escaping from the place, it went on for just ever. But overall, I really did like it. I didn't give it a very high score, but At number 8, Thunderbolts. Again, I could just repeat everything for. Well, no, not really. At 7, Fantastic Four, The First Steps, I thought was probably the best superhero film of the year overall. I thought it did the least wrong. I thought it was really classily made. I don't know if I put a review online anyway, but it was classy, and I thought the only performance in a superhero film overall that I thought was better than Florence Pugh was Vanessa Kirby, who I thought was fantastic in this film. The other people, I didn't have a problem with Oscar in it. He was good. The other two were just underwritten, but not bad. Visually really stunning, and the whole notion of Galactus coming to Earth to just destroy it was, I thought it was really good. I thought visually and like the stylized, a lot of people have tried to do old school comic book, and I thought they did that in a really modernist way. It felt like watching a comic, and I thought they did really well. So that's my 7th best film of the year, and the film that probably is under the radar the most on this list is Drop. So I'm just going to bring it up. It's basically a two-hander sort of film where it all happens in one environment, and the director, Christopher Landon, just has that one restaurant to work in where a girl goes on a date with a new guy, and she starts getting text messages at the table telling her to do terrible things, and convincingly. So the rest of the movie is like, it's not very original. We've been down that road a lot of times, but Megan Faye is necessarily outstanding as the lead. She's so good, and the film needs her to be. You can sort of see where it's all going, but it still throws up interesting paradigms, like the whole thing where they have to move the table back and forth to the window. Social embarrassment is really high in this film, and they shoot the interior of the restaurant so it feels filmic. It feels like a big environment, and it's really classy. So I thought that was a good film. I thought that deserved a lot more attention. It did well on streaming, I believe, and it did pretty well at the box office considering it was incredibly cheap. But yeah, that was my 6th best film of the year. I will get into a tranche of my worst films of the year when I come back. And so sad. Continuing with my best and worst films of the shittest year for movies that I've seen during the course of the calendar year in the history of this show. I mix it up with my worst films of the year, so I'm going to do the first tranche of those, the 10 to 6 worst films of the year. It wasn't even a good enough year to have really great bad films, to be honest. So my criteria for worst films of the year, I like to put this out there at the start, is not that it is just a flat-out terrible $100,000 budget indie drama that no one's seen. It's just fairly pointless, to be honest. So there has to be some criteria, such as the people involved I would expect more from, because previously they've made such good films. Dune is a winner for me. Dune was one of my worst films of the year winners because I was such a fan of Denis Villeneuve. Same with Christopher Nolan and Tenet. Christopher Nolan is one of those. I think Christopher Nolan and Denis Villeneuve have both won my worst and best films of the year. I think Sicario might have been my best film of the year that year. So if it's got really strong people in it, the director, the writers, and so on, and I just think it's terrible. And also critical opinion, if it's got a lot of praise, and I think that it just doesn't deserve it. So a really bog standard choice at number 10, Heads of State. It's just everything that's wrong with this sort of Netflix era, throw $200 million at an action film, but it just doesn't work on any level. It's like it sets itself such a low bar, and it just continually half-heartedly does a pull-up halfway and then lets down. John Cena and Idris Elba could have been a really good pairing, and they work quite well, but it's just this continually diminishing law of returns on the amount of money they've thrown at the screen. And it's the kind of film where you're quite glad it's over and you kind of wish you hadn't bothered. I enjoyed Red Notice more than this. At number 9, the best film that I've ever had in my worst films of the year is Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning. based on that criteria of expecting something so much more. The first one, Dead Reckoning, was the Mission Impossible and Fast and the Furious franchises I've related to each other a lot, how they took a while to get going, and by the fourth film had really solidified what was great. Some would say the third, in Mission Impossible's case, that's still got a lot of hokey rubbish in it, but it's got Philip Seymour Hoffman. But Ghost Protocol, like 4 to 6, or whatever Fallout was, that run of state-of-the-art, incredible films. I do like Tom Cruise. I'm not one of these haters of Tom Cruise. But they were they were better than Bond. They were the pinnacle of state-of-the-art action-adventure films. And Dead Reckoning came out with a lot of fanfare. It had been derailed so badly by COVID. It took like 5 years to make and so on. And it did a lot of things that the previous films hadn't done. Like the Fast and the Furious, it really repeated itself. It really did sort of repeat motifs and stuff that had happened in the previous films, rather than like Ghost Protocol offering the shock of the new and being really interesting. It was kind of like retreading old ground. And that was a warning sign. What I would say about the Final Reckoning, which I would still watch over many, many other films, well, virtually any action-adventure film from the year, is that it makes Dead Reckoning look a lot better. It makes Dead Reckoning look like a worthy follow-on from Fallout or whatever the predecessor was. Not as good, but at least it was sort of aiming in the same ballpark. I found Final Reckoning, which I think I gave a 7 out of 10 to be a real mess. It's really long. The characters are the worst part, as the characters have been so strong in the previous films, including Dead Reckoning. The characters were really good. Here we're left with really not much. They try and bring in a lot of newbies, which felt like the new generation of Mission Impossible. And no one here is worthy of that at all. It's very long. And whereas we got, the climbing up of the tower in Dubai or wherever it was in Ghost Protocol, and all these like new paradigms, here we get like very long sequences like biplane stunts. I can understand if they're going for like a retro nostalgia trip, but that's something that we've seen since the 1920s, and I don't know that it achieved much except for chewing through half an hour of screen time. Nothing really meant anything. I didn't like the fact that they had this, I hate the plot device that there's an all-powerful computer that controls all computers. They got away with it in the first film by making that all-powerful computer sentient and more interesting, but in the end that didn't amount to anything. And I thought they set up a really great villain in Dead Reckoning, and he was just Pat in this. And they kind of contradict everything at the end by just keeping the freaking computer that's going to destroy the universe and just walking off. So plenty to admire here, but nowhere near as much to admire here as anything since 3. So that's my 9th worst film of the year. At number 8, a franchise I've trashed all the way through. It is watchable hokum, the Conjuring series. I haven't given a good review to a single film, apart from 2. Conjuring 2 I did like, and probably because the 2 leads in it weren't in it as much. I think they're the Achilles heel of The Conjuring, is the husband and wife duo. I just find them just egregiously hokey and fake, and I've never liked the performances of the actors in it. Everything wrong with the Conjuring series, I'm talking about The Nun and the other Annabelle. A couple of those films have actually been decent, but like the third Conjuring film proper was pretty awful, and this is worse. This is incredibly messy. Every single thing in it is preordained, such as, anytime a character is by themselves and walks into a room, some ghosty stuff is going to start happening, and it's telegraphed. But they also spend a lot of time on the married couple and their daughter getting married, which is it feels like half of the film, and it's all trite rubbish. So that was probably the worst entry in a really shit series. At 7, the Stephen King adaptation, The Long Walk, got quite a lot of acclaim, and I found it torturous. So it was this Hunger Games-esque thing where a group of young people have to walk until they drop. Now, the problem with this film is not much else happened, and the young people were egregiously trite, and like the dialogue between them, which was carrying the entire film, was really bad. Spending time with them was cringe-inducing. Some of them were just aggressively annoying and didn't shut up the whole time, doing the same trite, garbage dialogue, no matter what the situation was. It was a struggle to get through, and I just don't think it really landed the end at all. The Long Walk was rubbish. At 6, the worst superhero film I saw this year, and rounding out my first 5 worst films of the year, at number 6, Captain America Brave New World. Doing a lot of doing what the Thunderbolts did, really, which is take the Black Widow character and replace Scarlett Johansson with Florence Pugh. They did the same with Captain America, which is Captain America's gone. The second most important character in MCU, second most important performance in MCU, much beloved, and replaced him with a sidekick that was amiable but absolutely a non-entity in the MCU hierarchy. But the film itself was garbage. It was really poor. It was messy. It was ugly as sin to look at times. Harrison Ford was fine, but virtually no one else came through this unscathed, including the new Captain America, who's not going to get any more goes at being Captain America, as it flopped. So I'll come back with another couple of my best films of the year after maybe a couple of tracks, because I do long talky bits on you. You're with Julian on the Brown Note, counting down my best and worst films of the year. Another couple of the besties. And finally, films that I gave 8 out of 10 to. 28 years later was not all the way great, but mostly. I really enjoyed the return to Danny Boyle and Alex Garland as a director-writing team. And the fact that it was very different to the original films. So it was a very unusual and possibly not the kind of film that the people that had enjoyed 28 Days and Weeks Later would have expected. It was about a future where there are remote cultures of human beings living in a feudal sort of setup, in a Middle Ages sort of vibe going on. And living in harmony of sorts with the zombies, all shot on iPhones with high definition cameras, I guess. But it looks amazing. The whole sort of foresty, Outer Hebrides sort of look about it was fantastic. And it did have a soul and depth to it. I thought the storyline of the dying mum, who was excellent, and the boy who wants to save her from death, going to meet Ralph Fiennes in an unexpected turn, and finding out that wasn't possible. I thought it was really soulful. I thought it was quite moving, and the gonzo nature of the zombies when they did appear, and they were used sparingly, with the massive schlong of the king zombie and everything, was just wild. The only real bum note in the whole thing, and Danny Boyle is capable of brilliance and awfulness in the same film, scene for scene, was the end, which, the cult of Jimmy Savile and the gonzo kung fu stuff at the end didn't have anything to do feeling wise with the rest of the movie. It was jarring. It was like, you'd taken a really soulful filmmaker and shoved the worst of Guy Ritchie in at the end, which wasn't great. But overall, I thought it was a really solid effort. They're almost releasing the sequel to it, The Bone Collector or something like that, or The Boneyard. And number 4 in my best films of the year, I'm pretty happy with this one in the list, F1. So F1 was a sports drama in the classic tropes of old school sports dramas from the 70s and 80s. In fact, it was a near remake of The Natural, the baseball film starring Robert Redford. And Brad Pitt is the obvious replacement for Robert Redford. Even Robert Redford feels the same, I feel, or he did when he was alive, because he actually cast him, I believe, in his film. and he's worked with him a couple of times at least. So he was perfect. The whole hangdog nature of the whole thing, the fact that it was really long and sumptuous, the fact that there was nothing modern about it at all. It was a real old school sports drama. And, you know, when they come in these sports dramas and they win everything, it's just rubbish. So in The Natural and in F1, it's like, can you join the worst team in the league and score a single point? So any sort of, you know, victories they had were earned because it was so gradual over the course of the movie that they would convincingly get into a place where that heroic victory could happen. They couldn't have got a better star. Well, I mean, it could have been Tom Cruise, I guess, but Brad, at his hangdog finest, was superb. The rest of the cast were all amiable and up for it. The visuals are very, very strong. They used real Formula One racing drivers and cars and even footage from the races to make it all look and sound fantastic. Very long, very good home entertainment, widescreen visuals as well. So I really enjoyed it. I've watched it a few times this year. I thought F1 was excellent, and it is my fourth best films of the year. When I come back, I'll go into my top 5 worst. In this segment, my top 5 worst films of the year. Number 5, Jurassic World Rebirth. The overview of the Jurassic Park movies would be that the first one was a brilliant film, an all-time classic, and that everything else has been terrible. And, I mean, that is broadly true. I think Jurassic 2 was alright, and there were elements in the Chris Pratt era, Bryce Dallas Howard era, which were good, but overall the films were very poor. But Jurassic World Rebirth actually is worse than anything that they've made. It is still watchable on some level, but the hokiness of everything, particularly the acting and dialogue, is crushingly poor in Jurassic Rebirth. Scarlett Johansson is taking a well-deserved paycheck by introducing herself as the next tranche of 3 movies that cost $300 million and did very well at the box office. Did over 900 million, I think, at the box office, proving that people will watch the Jurassic movies, whatever. But overall, I mean, Jurassic 3, the last of the previous films, this is in the running as the worst ever. It's the most pointless ever. A lot of the island footage and everything looked stunning, but then the big monster meanie looked absolutely terrible. But it was just the hokiness, like the family. That it is a remake of the third original Jurassic Park film where they get stranded on an island. There wasn't an original bone in its body, and the hokiness of the dialogue between the family and the soldiers and everything was just appalling. At number 4, the most successful superhero film of the year was Superman. Now, I'm not a James Gunn fan, I'm not a Zack Snyder fan, and all year it's been James Gunn fans saying how brilliant and amazing the film was, and Zack Snyder fans saying how awful it was compared to Man of Steel. Now, it was rubbish. It was really bad. The whole tone of the film was egregiously kid-friendly and hokey. David Corenswet can't act on the basis of this film. He was yelling like he was in a drama class. He was being beaten up all the time and having emo tantrums. There were sequences that looked good, but overall the CGI in it and the effects were really bad. The storyline was appalling. The Lex Luthor character was actually very, very good, and I liked the dog. So Nicholas Hoult and the dog came through it unscathed, but everything else was just awful. And the whole multiverse scenario just felt like post-Endgame MCU slop. And it didn't look good either. That whole Lego brick river thing that was the universe splitting open. Why have we got multiverses going on in a Superman movie? And I didn't want to meet any of the characters again. So that's my 4th worst film of the year. 3rd is The Accountant 2. I'm a big fan of The Accountant, and it seems like this year, see Megan, a lot of the second films to really quite cult-loved originals have done everything they could possibly do wrong. And The Accountant, I loved. The Ben Affleck starring film, The Accountant, warts and all, I thought it was a really strong film that has stood up to the test of time. The second one just threw everything that was great about the original out of the window. The autism of the Ben Affleck character has been watered down so much you don't even really notice it's there, whereas it was a very strong presence in the original film. And John Bernthal has never been more annoying than he is in this film. Everything about it was lesser, but particularly the fact that it threw away everything that made the original film so much better. So that's my third worst film of the year. At number 2, I mean, we've just had Alex Garland as a writer for 28 years later. Alex Garland has already won my worst film of the year and nearly did so again. His film Warfare. So he had an amazing run, both a writer for Danny Boyle, the writer of The Beach, no less, but also a writer of films for Danny Boyle, including the original 28 Days Later. Branched out into making films on his own and had a pretty amazing run with, Ex Machina, Annihilation, my second favourite film of that year, and Men was really underappreciated. And now he's done back-to-back trite war films that are just really bad. So Civil War won my worst film of the year because it should have been so much more than the sum of its parts. It's, this was a year of Trump's re-election. It should have been really about that world, and instead it was just an absolutely trite war photojournalist film at the back of the pack of the other 100 war photojournalist films. He's done the same sort of thing again with Warfare, which was praised heavily by critics, hence its high placing here. I thought it was rubbish. I thought the idea of a one battle thing has been done so much better. The Outpost is a great film. Even Black Hawk Down. This doesn't compare in any way. Like the stillness of the characters before the battle starts, the really trite dialogue, the very average performances. I think Nicholas Holt's in this one as well. Everyone is really average, and nothing happens that I haven't seen done better in a million other war films. A couple of sequences look nice, but overall, I thought Warfare was actually a pretty terrible film. Empty, and I worry about his writing given how empty Civil War and Warfare are. Please, Alex Garland, stay away from war films. And then we come to my number 1 film of the year, and it's probably a lesser film, but Osgood Perkins came out with Longlegs last year, and I thought in probably the best year for horror films in the modern era, it was right at the back of the pack. It wasn't an interesting film. It got a lot of acclaim. And the same with this. The Monkey is my number 1 worst film of the year. I normally stay away from anointing relatively low budget films that weren't massive on impact, but it did get pretty big box office and quite a lot of acclaim when it came out, but it is actually unwatchable. It's also the most trite version of a horror story, the monkey's paw sort of scenario where people get an artifact that does bad things. And then that's the whole movie where the artifact moves from place to place and bad things follow it. And that was it. It really didn't have a single thing to offer. The acting was garbage. The characterizations were non-eventful, trite, generic rubbish. The visuals weren't interesting on any level, and the whole idea of the monkey wasn't interesting at all. It was the most, next to college kids going off into a weird environment and being killed one by some crazy murderer or tribe, it's the most overdone generic horror trope from a Stephen King book. Not one that anyone is going to talk about. Probably a short story given the limited scope of the film, but everything about it was rubbish. I actually was annoyed watching it. So my number 1 worst film of the year is The Monkey, and I'll come back with probably one, unfortunately. And my third best film of the year, I'm doing my best and worst films of the year. The Monkey just beat Alex Garland's Warfare and The Accountant 2 and Superman as my worst film of the year. My third best film of the year, I'll do these individually, I think, is Black Bag. Now, I think Fassbender did the same thing with The Killer, because that was a major director that he worked with for The Killer, which was David Fincher, and that was a slept-on film. And this is Steven Soderbergh. One thing I like about Steven Soderbergh, he established a whole language for himself with the likes of Out of Sight and Ocean's 11. That style of filmmaking, aesthetically and sonically, he came up with that whole shtick, but he continually tries to take on smaller projects. His COVID film is still the COVID film, and does one-offs, and it's like he woke up one day and thought, I'm going to make a Tinker Tailor Soldier spy film, which is it. This is. It's probably the best spy film of its kind since that film. And it wins by the fact that not only have you got Soderbergh, who's such a consummate director, but you've also got the lead pairing of Cate Blanchett and Michael Fassbender, who are absolutely fantastic in this film. They play a very strange husband and wife couple, the kind that give you looks across the bar. She's incredibly powerful and charismatic, and he is obsessed with her. And they both have this very tight relationship, which is completely weird. But it works magnificently. And he's entrusted, like the Gary Oldman role in Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, he's entrusted with finding the traitor in the Secret Service in the UK. And a lot of the evidence points to it being his beloved wife. The major conceit about this film is they use the upper-class dinner party. So they have all of the other potentially villainous traitors, a raft of very strong, mostly apart from Naomi Harris, unknown actors, or at least not that well known, who are all very good. And they drug them at this dinner party with drugs that make them reveal the worst that they feel about each other. And there are a couple of long-form dinner party sequences which are really good. It's very classily shot. Soderbergh is such a classy director when it comes to the shooting and editing and everything about it. And Fassbender and Blanchett are magnificent it's a really good, exciting, low-key, slow burn spy thriller. And I think it's, next to Tinker Tailor, it's probably the best one since then. So I would definitely recommend watching what many people probably haven't, which is Black Bag. I thought it was an excellent film, and it's my third best of the year. Continuing on, you're with Julian on the Brown Note, and my second best film of the worst year for films since I've been doing this show, at least for the ones that I've seen. And neither of the top two were reviewed in real time on the show this year, which is very unusual. I did miss a period due to personal things that were going on. Is Begonia. So Yorgos Lanthimos is already well established as a terrifying auteur from the art house scene, and also someone that has nearly won Best Picture Oscar, certainly for The Favourite, for Poor Things. So he keeps sort of going backwards and forwards between the two worlds, which are his sort of Killing of the Sacred Deer level nightmare fuel films that are very, very button pushing, and Dogtooth and so on, and more populist fare like Poor Things and The Favourite. Begonia, I think, is a really good time for him to do something so low key that is solely about acting and dialogue. So last year he did Kinds of Kindness, which was, after a few populist films, he went back into the nightmare fuel of Yorgos, and that film felt like he was deliberately punishing the viewer. One of his most difficult films to get through. Both the leads turn up again, or not leads. Jesse Plemons should have got nominated for an Oscar for at least two of the three parts in Kinds of Kindness, but overall the film didn't really mean anything, and it didn't really go anywhere. And it felt like an exercise in punishment. You've watched Poor Things and The Favourite, now I'm going to hit you with the worst I can do to you. And it wasn't one of his better films at all. It was a very austere and punishing universe where the bad things that happened didn't really make any sense. So to see him going into this one, which is a completely new paradigm for him as a filmmaker, I feel, which is a very small environment two-hander. And I was like, I rolled when I saw Emma Stone coming back again for yet another Yorgos film, though she has benefited from the fact that all of her characters in his film are completely different. And she plays a very good role as a obnoxious CEO. So it's the top two films, like one of them is all about sort of resistance, and, you know, resistance to totalitarianism. This is much more about the conspiracy theory universe. They're both very modern films in that they engage with something that is massive at the moment. But the two central themes here are how awful CEOs are, and the way they treat their staff, and the way that they just think that they're alien gods, which is an ironic phrase if you've seen Begonia. And also the conspiracy theory universe. So we get Jesse Plemons and the actually autistic Aidan Delbis as these two guys living in a outback place. Jesse Plemons' mum has been killed or died as a result of treatment by the CEO's company. So he is a full-blown conspiracy theorist to the extent that he believes that aliens are from the solar system of Andromeda, are on Earth, and they're guiding everything that happens on Earth. And he believes that one of those people is Emma Stone's CEO. So he kidnaps her. So we've been down the road of, you know, rich or important people being kidnapped and being held hostage. But this time around, and watching Emma Stone's face change as she realizes just how bad this is, he doesn't want money and he doesn't want to kill her. He wants her to contact her alien overlords and to bring him to them to argue that the people of Earth should be left alone. And watching her face sort of change as she sort of realizes, and she's like, yeah, you need to do it in your own language. You can't do it in English. She's just like, oh man, this is going to be hard to get out of. They're both brilliant, and the casting here works really well. Emma Stone and Jesse Plemons were in the previous Kinds of Kindness together, but he's given a great role here. It's like I said, he should have been Oscar nominated for his dual performances in two of the three stories that made up Kinds of Kindness. He was superb. He's equally as good here. It's a fantastic performance, but both Emma Stone and Jesse Plemons trade off each other so well. It's like they're reacting to each other throughout this film, and it really does make it, because there's hardly any locations. There's no reliance. Actually, the score in this and the top two films are the best two scores I've heard all year. Jerskin Fendricks did the music. He did it for Kinds of Kindness and Poor Things as well. The music here is amazing. It's really, really good. You can't say much about the cinematography and everything else because it is just in limited environments where they're in the house, and a couple of times they're outside of the house. I thought that Yorgos really reined in his sensibilities for just button pushing for the sake of it here. There are some challenging scenes, but not too much compared to what he is capable of. And I thought that anytime it started spinning its wheels, it got back on the saddle and actually started gaining new momentum in a different direction. It was quite a surprising trajectory the way it went on, and there's some laugh out loud moments as well. It's actually really quite funny. And it's much more watchable than Kinds of Kindness. It's almost like this new middle ground between Kinds of Kindness and The Favourite. Emma Stone is fantastic in it as well. She really does need to make films with other people, though. And it's very timely, the whole notion of the conspiracy theorist. And the ending is pure Yorgos in that it goes gung-ho. But it feels earned. It feels like it's worth it. And I just found it very entertaining for, you know, what could have been an extremely intense, dour, low-key indie drama, which I guess it is in a way, was much more exciting and dynamic to watch, mainly because of the acting and the script as well. So my second favourite film of the year is Begonia, and I'll come back with number one after. You're with Gillian on the brown note, and the camera's going to go. my number one film of the year, I told you at the start because it's such a boring and obvious choice. One Battle After Another from Paul Thomas Anderson. I have to watch it again because I'm not sure whether it is as good as Boogie Nights, There Will Be Blood, and The Master in his top tier, or it's just a brilliant film in his sort of Phantom Thread second tier. And I think it will take a couple of... It's so stuffed with stuff that I think it's going to take a while. It's a hugely original film. Every 20 minutes, I didn't know what the next 20 minutes were going to bring, and it went on so many different tangents. Leo's performance was great. I think Chase Infinity's been a bit overrated here. I think she's very, very good in her first role, I believe. But I think the best performances are Leo. Sean Penn could win an Oscar, reining in everything that he does in a scenery chewing role, but he doesn't actually overdo it like he does in so many roles. His characters are amazing. Javier Bardem is also fantastic, and the original girl, Teyana Taylor, is fantastic at the start. It tells a revolutionary story about revolutionary terrorists like the Weather Underground in the 70s and 80s, going on the run after one of their kind is caught. The mother of Chase Infinity is caught and becomes a state witness. So Leo and his daughter, who is the Chase Infinity character, go on the run and live anonymously for the next 15 years. Then the Lockjaw character, played by Sean Penn, starts hunting them down again because he's trying to join this white supremacy secret society, and he doesn't want them to know that he might have a black daughter. Everything about it is consummate. Particularly the step up from Paul Thomas Anderson. Already, I think he's the most talented out of the David Fincher sort of world. But here he does an entirely new film. Who knew he was such a brilliant action director? Really tense, well-framed action sequences that it's surprisingly full of action. It looks amazing. The VistaVision looks amazing. And the soundtrack by Johnny Greenwood is absolutely incredible. Sorry, the score by Johnny Greenwood is absolutely incredible. The soundtrack choices are incredible. It doesn't go in any direction you expect it to go. Lots of it is very, very funny. Lots of it's very exciting. And it's my number one film of the year. Is it an all-time masterpiece or just the only film that I saw this year that I would actually give a 9 out of 10 to? So One Battle After Another is an incredible film, culturally very relevant. It sort of mixes the idea of those 70s revolutionary Black Panther, Weather Underground people with the notion of standing up to tyranny today as well. So I rate that as my number one film of the year. The camera's just switched off.